Hello, welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Our top focus this evening, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump held a telephonic conversation, their second in just 3 weeks. In a post on X, Prime Minister Modi said he congratulated President Trump on the success of the Gaza peace plan. The two leaders also reviewed the progress made in trade negotiations, agreed to stay in close touch in the coming weeks. President Trump had earlier called Prime Minister Modi on the eve of his birthday, their first direct conversation since the Trump administration imposed a 50% tariff on Indian exports. This latest call also comes soon after Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal's visit to Washington. How the two sides navigate India's purchases of Russian oil will be key to advancing trade talks, with Washington pressing for a halt, while New Delhi looks to maintain its energy autonomy. India, however, is exploring the option of increasing oil and gas imports from the US itself. Meanwhile, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News he expects India to gradually scale back Russian oil imports and pivot towards American energy supplies. He said both India and China have played a significant role in sustaining Russia's war economy through continued oil purchases.
We're doing a lot on Russia, but the real culprits here have been China and India in terms of buying Russian oil. They are keeping the Russian war machine going, and we put a 25% Russian oil tariff on India. And I think soon we're going to see a rebalancing where they're buying less Russian oil, more American oil. And if we were to do the same thing on China, I think the war would end quickly, but we need our NATO or European allies to join us. It's my strong belief that India is going to start rebalancing over the next few weeks and months, and we will see a diminishment of Russian oil in favor of U.S. oil.
And that's not all. U.S. Ambassador to India Sergio Gore and Deputy Secretary Michael Rygus will arrive in India later this week for a 6-day visit. They are expected to meet senior Indian officials to discuss key bilateral and regional issues. In a statement, the U.S. State Department said Washington remains committed to strengthening its strategic partnership with India and advancing a safer, stronger Indo-Pacific. Notably, 38-year-old Sergio Gore, a close aide of President Trump, is the youngest ever U.S. ambassador to India. Joining me now to take this further is Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Shankar, do the atmospherics look positive for a trade deal now?
Well, it looks, I would say, more positive than it did, let's say, a week ago, because you've had two conversations between the leaders. One in September, when President Trump called Prime Minister Modi to greet him on his birthday, and that broke the ice, as you will, and the two sides resumed trade consultations, first in Delhi with an official team, and then in the US when Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal went there for consultations. After that, you've had this conversation between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, in which he has congratulated President Trump for the Gaza peace deal, and also said that the two sides, the two leaders will be in close touch, and that there had been progress in the trade negotiations, which they will monitor. So this is definitely a tone which is more optimistic than in the past.
Right. Ambassador Shankar, what we have understood is that more or less there was a deal on the table in June when India had proposed tariffs in the range of 10 to 15%. The US side had almost agreed to it as well, but the president felt it lacked ambition. What do you think the two sides would be doing in terms of positioning the deal? Do you think that's what is actually left right now? How do you position this as a victory for both sides?
Well, I think that somewhere they'll have to work around their differences. For instance, on oil purchases, India may not halt purchases from Russia, but balance it by buying more oil and gas from the US. Similarly, there could be other deals for purchases by India, maybe some quotas, for certain imports, which may be considered sensitive in India, where you could say certain amount would be allowed, up to this quota. And then after that, these would be tariff-based quotas. So the lower tariffs would apply only up to a certain quantity of imports, thereby safeguarding the interests in India from being overwhelmed. So my sense is that they will find workarounds. They may not address some of these issues directly because I think it would be politically difficult, particularly on the Indian side. But, for President Trump, he has been fairly forthright in many of his about turns, let me say, on many issues. And the fact that, India and the Indian Prime Minister has commended his efforts in Gaza, and we support the peace plan. You've seen the latest statement, joint statement with the Prime Minister of the UK, where we have expressed our support for it and that we would like to work towards a durable ceasefire, an immediate and durable ceasefire, commencement of humanitarian assistance, and withdrawal of Israeli forces, and eventually a peaceful resolution, where there could be a two-state solution with a secure Israel and a viable Palestinian entity. So I think that the fact that the convergence, at least in West Asia,
Absolutely.
overrides, I think, many areas of dissonance.
Right. So clearly, Prime Minister Modi and India trying to give credit to Donald Trump for resolving tensions in the Middle East. What I would also like to ask you, what is the victory that we can give to Donald Trump? We've seen that with Japan, with Europe, with South Korea. All these nations, while striking deals with the US, somehow made announcements to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. Some of these deals are not on paper currently. But what can India do to give Donald Trump that victory?
Well, as I said, we would probably end up buying more from the US in a number of fields. We would lower tariffs, especially on manufactured goods and high-tech goods. And we probably will also look at stepping up Indian investment. So there's a range of things, because obviously the trade talks were progressing and making some way towards finding a consensus, because both sides were quite optimistic. And then, of course, the presidential approval was withheld. So it's not as though nothing had been worked out before that. The big area of the two areas where there was disagreement, one was agriculture, and the other was India's purchases of Russian oil. And I think, as I said, both countries will have to work their way around these issues.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Meera Shankar, for joining us with that very important perspective. All eyes right now, also on the ASEAN summit. And if Prime Minister Modi ends up going there, Donald Trump, of course, is going. But in case there is a meeting between the two leaders, we can expect some progress and some positive announcement on the trade deal if that happens. Thanks once again for being with us. Also on the show with me to decode the trade deal between India and the US is Mukesh Aghi, President of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Mr. Aghi, thank you very much for being with us. Let me begin by asking you, how do you see this conversation between PM Modi and President Trump? The second in 3 weeks, and the Prime Minister noting that there has been positive progress in the negotiation.
Well, I think these are very positive development. You have to understand that at some stage, when the president tweeted in a very negative manner, followed by Lutnick and Navarro also making some negative statements on India, that didn't go well in India itself. And you have a situation where the trust was broken. I believe now we're trying to build the trust back one tweet at a time, one phone call at a time, and I think it's moving in the right direction.
Right. Where do you feel things are right now? What is also important to note is that Sergio Gore is visiting India. He's not coming to take charge or present his credentials, but he's coming for a meeting with Indian government officials, and he'll be there almost for 2 or 3 days. What do you think is the message that he would be carrying from the Trump administration?
Well, obviously, the trade deal is important for the US and for India. And what we have is a position where Trump, as the president, would like to negotiate directly, and where we have a process in India where the prime minister does not get himself directly in negotiation. So we have a very big difference in style. And so that's where Sergey Gore comes in, who will come in and try to see what are the open items left. He can talk directly to the president and try to see if they can close the deal and move things forward.
Right. What's your sense about the mood in Washington at the White House about this trade deal with India? Are we near the finish line?
Well, obviously, I think that the mood is that let's find a way to close this thing, because any trade deal with India is important to the US, and so is for India, deal with the US is important. I think it's important to understand that India was one of the first countries which was about to close the deal, and somehow I didn't get it off the table, didn't close. It's time we close it and we start moving forward on other issues which we need to tackle between the two countries, be it on the climate side, be it on the geopolitical side. I think India and US will continue to move forward together as partners.
Right. What we also understand that while there are negotiations going on what should be the average tariff rate, there are non-tariff barriers, QCOs also being discussed. What's your view on what India can do to further ease things for US companies looking to invest?
Well, you have to understand it works both ways. And that means that there are certain things US has to do to help Indian companies succeed in the US market. And yes, we do have substantial non-tariff barriers which needs to be worked upon. That's where I would say that the Indian government is working with the US government to see what can be streamlined and move forward, because we would like to see more US investment coming into India. We'd like to see more technology coming into India, and all this creating more and more jobs for the citizens in India. So I think it is important for both countries to see where are the barriers and how you can move them. And that's the main point of discussion taking place between the two countries.
Right. You know, to speak to you about an issue which affects India very strongly, and that is the issue of rare earth. Clearly, the US-China tensions, and ahead of negotiations, the Chinese government has imposed further export controls on different kinds of rare earths, at least 5 to 6 new categories on lithium-ion batteries, which are used in electric mobility, and also manufacturing equipment related to rare earth and EV technologies as well. Very comprehensive restrictions. What would be your message to the Trump administration? Because this affects not just US companies, but US allies like India as well.
Well, China is exercising its leverage, is imposing its power on a global basis, trying to ensure that they are able to dictate terms and conditions to US and other countries. I think it's important that US India get together and focus on trying to build and develop rare earth policy between the two countries. India has tremendous capacity, both from technology perspective, from a skill perspective to build those. And I think that's where we like to see more US investment coming in, building a partnership between the two countries on rare earth, because the countries are being impacted by China's diktat on rare earth policy exports is impacting the auto industry in the US and also in India. So this sends a very strong message to India and the United States. Regardless of tariff or no tariff, we need to work together on rare earths between the two countries.
And finally, my last question to you would be, as you've been in India for the last few days, holding meetings with business leaders, with the government, are there areas of interest for US companies to invest in India right now? Are we going to see an active investment pipeline currently?
Absolutely. I have to say one thing, Parikshit. Last 2 months, I must have talked to 70 plus US CEOs. Not a single CEO has said that they will reduce the investment, or they will move the supply chain out of India, or they will not move forward in the global capability centers. The commitment, the interest, the market opportunity which India provides, US companies sees this in a very, very positive fashion. Regardless of the politics, the US companies will keep on investing and looking at opportunities for their product to be sold in India and also producing in India for the rest of the world. That interest continues without any hesitation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aghi, for joining us on the program today. We're taking a